Hello, hello. It's Elaine Lindsay of True Social Media here on BBPTV show. That's our show where we have the most amazing guests that tell us all about their interests, their lives, and they always leave us with some really fascinating tips, tricks, and tweaks for your digital world. Today, I'm here with Christoph Trappe. Hello.
Hi, thanks for having me. Good to see you again.
It's really great to have Christoph. I have to tell you, I met him this year in Victoria when we were both at social media camp. Christoph was talking and he gave such a great talk on authentic storytelling. I thought, you know what? We've got to get him on the show. And his book says, Get Real. Well, I'm definitely all about getting real. So I want to take a few seconds and give you a little bit of history because, wow, he's got quite the resume. Christoph, you lead a content and digital transformation in B2B publishing, I understand. And he's a career storyteller who's worked as a journalist. He's been with United Way, MedTouch, and he is one of the top 25 content marketers out there. He does public relations. He is a public relations leader. And you were just marked as one of the top 100 out there yesterday. I happened to see yet another award. There's a lot of good information, but let me say this. He really knows how to craft your stories and how to be real in crafting your stories. I think it's really incredible. His background is in originally, I believe, the health field and as a journalist with community news, which really gives you, I bet, a wealth of information that can really help you in storytelling in pretty much any niche. Want to read you one quote I found that Christoph put out there that I think is really excellent. It's, sorry, bosses, many times you're not your organization's target audience. Such a good point.
It's hard to remember.
Yeah. We'll get into it when we get into the book because that was one of the things that really fascinated me. You talk about interior and exterior audiences. And it's something people just don't think about often. You want to maybe give them a better idea of what I'm muttering on about.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks again for having me. So what's really interesting, it used to be in marketing, you would have an interior, like an internal audience and external audience, right? So basically what my internal message is different from my external, which doesn't actually work in practice because bottom line is, I was talking to a CEO one time and she wanted to blog. And basically what she said is, should this be internal or external? I said, well, how many employees do you have? And she said, oh, we have about 12,000 employees. Well, bottom line is, you get anything in front of 12,000 people or even 6,000 or 3,000, there's no such thing as internal or external. Yeah. So everything you say has to be external, right? So if something gets out there, you don't like it because you didn't vet it or whatever. So keep that in mind. Your message, your story can't change too much. So for example, I'm talking about this stuff, you know, I'm talking here and there, and my story never really changes. The examples change and the experience change and how you do it in different industries might change. But overall, my message to you doesn't change. If I go to my wife tonight and she'll say, I don't want to hear about storytelling anymore, but again, same thing, right? So, but of course, for the powers that be, sometimes that's really hard to remember because people, and this is a human thing, right? We make decisions based on our perception. So, you know, if you're the boss and you say, this is my perception that works, and you don't have any better numbers, you can't do anything about it. Yeah. Right. And I'll give you this example. I am in B2B publishing currently with 3 established media brands. And it used to be, as a journalist, basically what you would do is, if your boss liked your article, you did great. If nobody wrote in and complained, you're golden. you know, and we don't know if anybody read it, right? Because it's in print.
Yeah.
But today I can tell you who reads what on all the websites, what articles take off, what are people interested in. So we know whether or not your good content was actually good content. So it's a very different world.
Oh, absolutely. And you can get as granular as knowing how much of that content they read.
Right. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a big difference. Oh, that's a really good point. Sorry, I called it interior, exterior, but same sort of thing. I find that in reading the book, as much as it's about stories and about authentic storytelling, for me, it seems like the ultimate how-to for businesses to really craft authentic stories and be able to understand the how and the why of everything. Mm-hmm. In this book, Christoph gives you all the points, all the tips from headlines into how important we have being new. There's a whole bunch of things I want you to sort of give people, but I want people to understand this is an incredible primer that you can use in any niche. And it actually wouldn't matter if you're a solopreneur like me, glamapreneur, we have a small company. Even if it's a gigantic corporation, the same tenets hold true. And you're really making a beautiful roadmap into how to be real.
Great. Yes. Thank you for saying that. That's exactly the intent, right? So people always say, what are the actionable steps? You know, 3 to 5 actionable steps. And I can give you the steps. Bottom line is you still have to take them yourself. So, but in the book, you can read them. You can see this is what I have to do. This is the next step. If you're stuck, you can go back and you can say, why didn't something work? And here's why it didn't work, because we missed a step, or we're not currently actively doing it. It's very similar to, I'll tell you, so I played football at the University of Iowa almost 20 years ago now, but I was an offensive lineman, so I gained a lot of weight. And, then I lost a lot of weight, probably, 140 pounds, right around there. And the bottom line is, it's a very deliberate thing. You can't lose 140 pounds if you don't keep track of every calorie coming in, every calorie going out through exercising, that kind of thing. And it's very similar with some of these techniques, because we're all in these systems of this is how you do it. This is the corporate culture you're in. And if you don't deliberately change them and deliberately keep pushing to change them, you can't do it, right? So that's really what it's trying to help you do. Figuring out what are the steps. If a step isn't working, how do you get back to it? How do you keep moving forward and keep pushing along?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that it's really good because it can be very intimidating for businesses and for people to, somebody just says to them, yeah, you've got to be authentic, do some storytelling. We're hearing that everywhere. Everywhere you turn, people tell stories. But you're actually making it viable for them to understand exactly what that means in terms of their actual stories and how they relate that to what's actually happening either with their company or outside their company. And I think that's what really fascinated me. That's odd. I'm hearing myself back, which I did. Can I get you to maybe sit back just a wee bit from your mic? It's a funny thing in live streaming. You tend to get reverb only when you get a little closer to your mic, which is totally counterintuitive to radio or television. Oh, well, it's just a little bit, so not too bad.
And can you still hear me? I can move the mic a little bit. Hold on.
I hear you perfectly.
Let's see. How's that?
That's
still good. Okay.
Yeah. So at what point did you realize that you needed to write this book?
Well, so funny story. So I've been a storyteller for forever and ever. And so I grew up in journalism, moved that to corporate communications, marketing, those kind of things. And so I was blogging. I've been blogging for a long time. And basically what happened is, so I started the Authentic Storytelling blog. Maybe that was the start of that project. AuthenticStorytelling.net has about 500,000 readers or so. And people kept saying, you should write a book about this topic. Even Joe Polizzi, who I think I quoted in my keynote, he's the content marketing, he was the founder of the Content Marketing Institute. And even he said to me, you got to write a book. And I said, I don't have to write a book. People can just read my blog, and they do. And he goes, yeah. And they do read your blog, but it's different when you have that book in your hands. And then, of course, now you can distribute it. And now, even you saw it at the conference. They gave a book to everybody at the conference. They couldn't have said, here's a printout of the blog, or or it's not the same thing. And then even the chief strategy officer at MedTouch, that's Sandra Fancher, she kind of kept pushing that too. She kept saying, you should really just write a book. You write every day anyways. You might as well get that out of your system. And what's really interesting is when you actually self-publish, you learn a lot, right? Because first of all, how do you do it? How does it look? How do you update it? How do you, how do you get a cover? How do you go about that? And then how do you market it once it's out the door? So finally, those two mostly, they kept bringing it up, and they said it a couple times, and they kind of convinced me to do it. And it is the blog to book strategy. So basically, everything in the book is also on the blog. They're not, as you know, it's not just a collection of blog posts. So there's a lot of rewriting that happened, and a lot of changing of where it goes, and then I cut things and all these different things, and and then I just published it. And what's interesting, I did another book, and it's already outdated, but it's about 50 pages on live video, and it still has blab in it, so super outdated already, right? I know, but that's how Yeah. Anyway. It's only 50 pages. I didn't do as much rewriting, didn't do as many transitions as the much longer book in storytelling. And Amazon rejected it. And they said, this seems to be an exact replica of what's available for free on the web. Wow. Please tell us why that might be and where we may have found the free content. So they don't tell me where they found it. They just say, and so then I wrote back and I said, well, I'm sure you found it on AuthenticStorytelling.net because that's where I wrote it. Yeah. And it's on there because that's my site, and I own the content. And I want to publish it as a book because, all the reasons I just mentioned. And they set it free, and it's still available. Don't buy it, please. It's way outdated. Because stuff changes too fast, But
you heard it here first, folks. That's the only time an author is ever going to tell you, yeah, don't buy that.
don't
Talk
buy
about Authentic. Okay, that one, ding ding winner. That was awesome.
At least that one. The other two you can. But so anyway, so that's kind of what spurred that. And now it's actually a fantastic tool. Like you can take it to events. You can. Like every once in a while I go to a conference and somebody says, oh, did you bring your... I actually ran into a guy in the airport one time and he said, do you have a copy of your book with you? And, and I'm like, yeah, I carry like 10 copies around everywhere I go. Of course I didn't have a copy, right? But he says, well, I still like one. He paid me right then, and then I sent it to him when I got home because he wanted a signed copy. But it was... but you can't do that with a blog, even if you have a successful blog, it doesn't work that way.
No. Well, not only that, but it takes time to comb through a blog, to go and pick the pieces you need. The book has everything right exactly where you need it, in the order that you need it. And that's, I think, what makes it so great is because it is in a way that you can use it. What I found really interesting is it's also set up in a way that I was helping somebody else out with them trying to put a particular story out. And we'd done the headlines, we'd done something else. And right at the back of the book, you have things on ROI and what have you. But you had a story about the do not reply to this email.
Yeah.
And it was just, I don't know if it was because it was funny or what it was, but it just sort of broke the lock that this guy was in. And he said, oh, And he went on to finish what he was doing, understanding that it didn't have to be so deadly serious. Okay,
Right.
he just, he just seemed to think everything had to be oh so serious. And I said, no, look, you can inject a little humor. What I'm talking about, I'll let Christoph tell you about do not reply. And I just think it's hilarious because you see it so often. Okay. I
Yeah.
mean, we all get every day probably something that comes from do not reply. Don't you just want to do it?
It's the dumbest thing ever, honestly. And especially, I mean, there's some places where it's fine, you know, if it's like an alert or something, like from an airline or whatever. But we have some companies out there, they're all like about, oh, two-way communication, build engagement.
Yes.
And then their email comes from do not reply. So
Yeah.
what I'm telling people is stop it, knock it off.
Yeah.
Use an email, either a person or a brand or something a little bit more personal, and then send it from there. And then also, and I know this gets really hard. I mean, I'm working with brands, they send hundreds of thousands of emails, you know, in a couple of days. So you can't monitor them all. And then of course you also get out of office replies from
Yeah.
people, right? I mean, depending when you send an email, you might get like 20,000 out of office. So you actually, what you have to do is you have to filter the out of offices into
Yeah.
the trash immediately. And then you have a folder where you keep track of what people are saying. But when I worked in nonprofits, what they did, they actually had people reply to their emails, and they weren't even personal emails. They were just emails. They were like, here's something coming up. Here's what's new, blah, blah, blah. And people would reply and say, oh, did you get my donation?
Yeah.
You don't want to miss that email, right? I mean,
No.
seriously, you want to circle back and say, oh, we did or we didn't. So you do want to figure out a way to monitor and filter out all those emails that you don't actually need to see, because out of office, you don't need to see necessarily, you know, but it's such, we're preaching community engagement, and then guess what?
Yeah.
We're
Yeah.
reply email.
And even if it's 1 in 5,000 that has a message that's important, that's
Right.
worth it. I don't care how big the company is or how small. And as you say, that we do preach community engagement. We preach building relationships. It's pretty hard to build a relationship when you're told not to reply.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, okay, all the things not to do.
Well, we have that on social media too. You know, everybody is out there blabbing and then they don't reply. I reply to most people. There's a few people, sometimes I mute them if they're just constantly trying to get into an argument.
Yeah.
The other day, there was some, I don't remember what I wrote about. I wrote about something, and some guy replied, and he basically wrote a blog post saying that whole blog post wasn't good or something, or his experience is different. That hasn't happened to him, blah, blah, blah. But he didn't even tell me that what he wanted until I had to click, right? So apparently he wanted me to share it.
Yeah.
I think I liked it, and then I moved on. But I don't know what else to even do with that, right? So like, just, I mean, it doesn't mean just because you're talking to me doesn't mean that I'll share your story with everybody. I'll pay attention unless you're turning into a troll, you know, or the digital lynch mob, which is kind of another unfortunate thing we're seeing out there anymore. But the one thing, you know, that I've learned over the years is that if you're doing it well, some people will actually not like you, and some people will actually be mean and share things, and you know, and what's interesting is so I did a video about that. Have you seen the mean tweets on Jimmy Kimmel?
Yeah.
So I did that for my own mean tweets that people have sent to me, and I shared them, right? But when you first start getting those kind of things, people, it doesn't feel good. You don't know what to do, blah blah blah. So you just kind of have to let them go and then turn them into a video and put that in a blog post. But of course, you know,
suddenly going to be a flood of mean tweets. Yeah.
So yeah.
No, and that's a really good point. And I think often, you know, just even it's not been very many years since a lot of companies were very locked down about letting the employees do anything online or on social, because everybody was so afraid of what was going to happen. Would there be trolls? Would someone say the wrong thing? When we have to realize that, you know, guess what? Humans aren't perfect. None of them. I've taken to a new saying. I'm always telling people, if humans were perfect, there'd only be two. Could be a man and woman, that'd be it. It'd be done. So stop trying to attain the unattainable. People understand, you know what? We all make mistakes. We just have to own them. And isn't that more endearing to you? Would you not trust someone more if they owned up to the fact that they made a mistake? They, tweeted something wrong, or they posted something that was incorrect, or they went off on someone, to come back and say, I'm really sorry, I was having a bad day, or what have you. That, I think, is much more healthy for a relationship to build than trying to make sure that the only things that go out are very one note.
And people do that on Twitter. They go and apologize. They do that. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Not as often as they ought to. And there's some who should be apologizing and don't. But you have to. I think people have had to sort of take a deep breath and go past the problem of trolls and past the problem of, improper posts and people, deciding that they just can't agree with what you're putting out. I think they're a lot fewer and more far between than the people who are actually taking value from what we post. I know in your case, the other day you were posting about Facebook took away the scheduling, just apropos of nothing. Yeah. Things change on social all the time. And it can be difficult for companies, especially big companies that are mired in procedures and our policies dictate, and you have to go through all these channels. It makes it very hard to stay up to speed with something like social media, where things just, turn on a dime and you never know from one day to the next. Have you got any good tips for people on how to kind of roll with the punches?
Yeah. So here's how you do it. High level strategy. Right? Here's what we're trying to accomplish. Here are our goals. Here's what we want to accomplish. And then continuously go. You always go and go and go and try new things. I'll give you an example. Instagram TV launched a little bit ago here.
IG.
And yeah, IGTV. And it's totally dumb if you think about it, because what they're saying is their only differentiator is that people want to watch like that.
Vertical.
Yeah. Vertical. But most everybody watches like this. And what's funny about that is when I teach content creators and to do video, everybody always holds the phone like this, right? Because it's natural. And I say sideways. I don't even say, horizontal, but sideways, hold it sideways. But now what they're saying is that, people will watch video like this, which is probably true, but it's hardly a differentiator, right? So, but everybody out there, the second they launched, they had stuff on their channels. So people said to me, how do they have stuff on their channels? They just launched like last night. And so what they do is they just take their other videos, they put them on IGTV, doesn't look perfect, nobody cares. So that's what the people who actually know how to do social do it, and they did it, and it didn't look perfect. But what they didn't do is they didn't say, okay, we're hiring an IGTV producer and director, and then let's set up the team and we'll produce stuff, right? That's not what they do. They just get to it. And there's actually about maybe 3 to 6 month period of where you can actually monetize and build audience on new things, because the second it works, they just change the rules again anyways, right? Yeah. So you have to hop on the bandwagon, you have to try it, you have to see if it works, and then you kind of move on to the next thing.
Yeah, that's such a good point. It's like, Facebook stories are now really taking over because they worked so well on Instagram. So Facebook's saying, well, hey, let's get on this bandwagon. We own all these things. Let's make the most of it. And we had a discussion with a number of social media people, Mari Smith and a few others that we've, chummed around over the past few years. And everybody said the same thing. It seems to be, this is a millennial thing. This is millennial. This is the rest of us. Because millennials, although they watch YouTube and what have you, they are used to watching it on a phone.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
Most of them don't bother with a desktop or even a laptop. A big thing would be a tablet. So they're so used to the verticality. That's really why IGTV came out with what it did. The unfortunate thing is, most of what you want to do in a video doesn't work vertical. If you want to have people side by side, if you want to show somebody something you have with you, you just don't have that width. And I think it's going to be interesting to see just how far it goes before people realize that, just taking the effort to turn sideways is actually going to be a good thing, because you get a much better view. It's like panoramic images. You want to see 360? That's because we like to see what's on the periphery. You can't just, make everything in this one little vertical. Verticals are for business, right? I don't think they're for video.
Right. Well, we'll see what happens. But the iPhone, and I know Android devices as well. I mean, they are changing how people create things. Even so I wrote my books on my phone, on a plane. I mean, basically, I'm like this. If I'm typing, or I'm voice dictating.
Yeah.
And now I even have those AirPods. I put the AirPods in, and now I'm voice dictating through the AirPods. So it's changing. And some people say to me, when they've never thought about it or they've never done it, they say, "Oh my God, I need a keyboard to write. I can't write phone." And had you asked me maybe 10 years ago, I would have said, "Oh, I need a keyboard too." But today, you use whatever tools are helping you make it work.
And I'm a baby boomer, so I'm the much older generation. I'm also the world's worst typist. So for me, adopting the new technology is dead simple, because it means less mistakes. It means people can understand what I'm saying. I don't accidentally sext people like my son or anyone else, because that's another story for another day. Just not a good thing. But that kind of dexterity that the millennials have, and the kids who have been born into an internet world, it's amazing to see. And I'm 62. I'm proof positive that anybody can learn to utilize it. But don't you think it's a lot easier to just hold this with earbuds and talk? I mean, that just makes so much more sense to me than typing everything. Not only that, I have to put my glasses on if I want to type on my phone.
Right. Still read it. Before you send anything voice dictated, make sure you read it, because you never know how it might end up.
And depending on your voice, depending on, I have a bit of a lisp. And when Siri first came out, Siri had a problem understanding me. She decided that, I just did not speak English well enough for her. I have an Android. I have a Google Pixel 2 XL. And it's understanding me a little better these days. But I think they've all evolved that way, so that all of the voice, Dragon, all of the speaking programs, they all take into account these different regional accents and dialects, which really makes it easier for people to do. But being able to voice something when you're traveling, or when you're, waiting, somebody's waiting at the dentist's office, or you're waiting around for another appointment, or something happening, it's so much easier to just be able to speak what it is that you want. And it doesn't matter. I mean, you have to proofread whatever you put out anyway, or you certainly should anyway.
You bet.
So in terms of this, I find your your style of writing is really comfortable. It's very, it's not just interesting to read, but it makes you want to learn more and take in more, which I think is really great. So when's the next book and what's it going to be about?
Well, thank you so much. I do appreciate that. That's still in the planning phases right now. I was kind of thinking of actually updating the live video book. Everybody's on video. I do have enough content for that actually to potentially be a little bit more fleshed out now, because I do a fair amount of writing on live video here and there. You know, the next one, something around journalism, probably. How do you mix the two? How do you keep that? How journalists make the switch to content marketing? How do you implement journalism tactics, techniques into content marketing? Something like that. So that's kind of, it's not really top of mind right this second, but you know, certainly that's something always to think about.
Well, put another one in your back pocket. I think you should do one on self-publishing too.
Yeah, that's an interesting topic.
Yeah. And it's something that so many people ask about, and there seems to be not as much information as one would think out there.
Huh, very interesting. Okay, I'll put that in my back pocket.
Yay. Well, talking about that then, you've also written a book on content. Give us a little...
So storytelling, and then how to be customer focused. Yep.
Customer focused with content, because content is your, I mean, that's your niche, that's your market.
Yep.
So give us an idea of being customer focused. This is a problem a lot of people have. Okay, you look at websites and you look at social media, and all of the about stuff is always about that person, and really it needs to be customer focused. Everything needs to be customer focused. Each of us are each other's customers. Every time you talk, whether it's to your wife or your children or a business person, you are selling your idea, your product, whatever.
Yep.
We need to really understand, I think, how better to craft that content. And I think your customer aspect is, well, this is just an extension of that. So maybe give a couple of tips on, you know, how do you do that, and how do you tie it in to everything that you craft, everything that people write.
Yeah. So what's interesting is, so the way content and storytelling fits together with being customer focused actually comes back to, when you create a good customer experience, the customers will actually share your story on your behalf, right? Automatically. And I'm thinking about even, so I travel a lot, and it's really hard for me nowadays to not fly American Airlines. And I personally can't relate to all the negative stories out there about American Airlines, because I have a very different experience, right? Or even the hotels I stay in, very, very, very similar. So I share their stories, right? I share my own experiences. And so what you want to do, I'm not saying all the airlines are actually all customer focused. They're not, but they are customer focused for some of their returning customers, right? So think about, how do you create that experience for your customers to make it about them? No, you don't want to make them the hero of your brand story. That's just marketing gobbledygook, quite frankly. But you do want to give them an experience that they feel like it's worth sharing. And here, there's only two types of stories that people share. One is when they're really upset, when something really didn't work. So like, there's very few people who leave reviews and they say, this was a 3-star trip, I'm okay. They hardly anybody does that. People go, this is fantastic, or this is crap.
Yeah.
Right. So what you want to do is, you want to figure out, how do you turn those experiences, how do you make them work? And of course, training is involved with the staff. It is top down. I hate to say it, but it is.
Yeah.
If the top down has the attitude that it's about the customer. And then the other thing is, we have to agree who the customer actually is. I'll give you an example. In nonprofits, who's the customer? Is it the donor? Is it the person who uses the services? You know, who is it? Same when you have an audience, right? When you build your audience, who's the customer of my blog? Is it my reader? Is it the people who want to buy things from me, which are sometimes readers, but not always? Who is it, right? So you have to make sure you actually agree on who that is. And when there's too many definitions and not enough agreement, sometimes it doesn't work as well.
And in the nonprofit sector, I think those that do it well, they not only focus on their donors, they focus on the volunteers that do all the heavy lifting and make it possible for those donors to give. And again, not about the hero stories, but just in general about, you know, what it takes to be a volunteer and the breadth of what it is volunteers do in certain nonprofits, well, in all of them. There's so many different areas that people really don't know about. And there's such a wealth of stories around us in all those areas.
Yep. Oh, there's stories all over the place. You can walk down the street and there's 8 stories to share. So when people say to me they have a story problem, you know, there's not enough stories happening. It's baloney. There's always stories happening. You either not encouraging people to share them, you don't want to share them, or you don't, you know, or there's some other reason. But there's always plenty of stories. Companies have enough content too. I mean, already if they're producing content, there's always enough content. Sometimes not the right kind necessarily, but there's always stories. I mean, I was at the Gulf of Mexico last week, and there was like all these things I could write about, and some of them I did. Some of them I shipped back to editors, and I said, take a look at this. That's interesting. This is interesting. It's like it didn't stop. I mean, it was just, you know, endless supply of things to talk about.
And that, okay, let's get a little niche down there, because I really want you to give people the idea of this. Because people often will say, oh, you know, people say write authentic stories and just write, but as you just said, I just don't know what to write about, or where would I look for those? So for instance, yeah, you just said you went to the Gulf of Mexico. So even take it, for instance, you're walking down the street in your own hometown, and that's Iowa, that's Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I don't know why, but I always keep thinking you're in Minnesota. Not that I know anybody in Minnesota. I don't know why Minnesota's stuck in my head these days. It just is. Anyway, you're walking down the street, Cedar Rapids, just off the top of your head. What could be something that would tweak your attention that you could turn into a story?
I mean, there's 100 different things. You know, there's construction down the street. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? What's the story behind the construction worker, right? I mean, think about it. What do they do when there's no construction season in Iowa, right? We have long winters. Do they get paid? Right? I mean, think about it. There's, you know, all these things. And then when you're talking to them, now you could talk about their family and what, oh, now there's another story that comes from the spouse or whatever it might be. I mean, there's so many stories. Even the other thing is I go on a lot of walking meetings downtown, and I have my headphones in when they're on the phone. And one thing I noticed is it's actually really loud downtown because there's buses driving by, there's people. And the other thing I noticed now, a lot of people are smoking at the street corner, right? Because you can't smoke on the properties anymore. So now people are on the corners, and it's super annoying because now you have to walk through the smoke. So you could even write about that. Yeah. Now, so there's a gazillion different stories. Now, the trick is for businesses, before you go out and write about the construction worker, don't write about the construction worker if it has nothing to do with your business. So you do have to tie it back to those goals that we talked about early on, and then tell those stories. Now, the trick is not to overthink it, right? So I'll give you an example. Again, we're doing this live, so we're just kind of coming up with the ideas as we're going here. And so construction worker, what could be a story that has something to do with one of the brands I work with? One of the brands I work with is Meetings Today. They're a publication for event planners. And so construction worker, let's see. How often are conferences impacted by construction around the convention center or whatever? See what I'm doing here? I'm building one idea on top of another. Could they do a story on that? Absolutely. How often are there accidents, or how often, I mean, who knows, right? You can just kind of go from there and build on top of the different ideas.
Well, and I'm thinking for the event planners, who better to give them the lowdown on what the next big Congress center is going to be, or where they're planning on adding a new event place. Correct. Because a lot of the construction foremen and supervisors are already aware of where they're going to be next and what's coming down the line.
Right. Yep.
So yeah, so that's another road in the same sort of area. I'm so thankful to get to talk to you, because you're doing exactly what I was hoping you do, is showing people just how really simple you can make it if you don't stick yourself deep in your head. Just kind of, riff as you can and take it somewhere. And I think every business, especially, not so much government per se, but not-for-profits and companies that really do have a lot of different areas to choose from when they're doing their stories. There's probably a little bit of something in just about anything you could see on the street that you could tie back to your company, to the volunteers. Maybe those construction workers all give a day a month to Habitat for Humanity, or there's so many sort of tie-ins that you could look for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. It's a never-ending sea of stories, and then you just got to tie it all together. And that's, maybe as one of the, I don't know how long we go, but as one of the final notes, or whatever, we can keep going, of course. But the over vetting of stories needs to stop. So what people do is they say, they go to a committee meeting and they say, I was walking down the street, and they already get interrupted by like 8 people. Because everybody says, me too, and whatever. And like, that's not a story. We don't care about streets here. Well, that's not the point, because I haven't finished my sentence, right?
Yeah.
And then say, so I'm talking as a construction worker, here's what, blah, blah, blah. And now they try to vet every story to death. And that's exactly what happens with those stories. They go to die because you don't even let them come out and about. So don't overthink it. Don't have committee meetings for all kinds of different things. Committees are not helping move strategy forward quickly. Yes, it's fine to have some structure, to have some people involved. You have to have people involved to tell your stories. It doesn't work any other way. But you have to move. You have to publish them. The story, I can tell you what, these are the stories that will never perform anywhere. The ones that don't publish, nobody will read them, right? So
such a good point. Such a good point. Yeah, and on that note, the vetting and the committees, and I think they have to take, big companies really have to look at setting their policies completely different, because social media has opened it up to a much shorter time frame. Because things get old as fast as they come out, and it is kind of a hurry up and get it out there. But so often that freshness is what makes it work.
Mm-hmm.
Think the Oreo taking advantage. Oreo's taking advantage of the blackout at the Super Bowl. Somebody was definitely on their feet. Okay, that was really, really smart. And rather than going to committee and thinking about how do we plan this, they just off they went. Yep. And it was a really excellent campaign. In terms of the bigger picture of authentic storytelling, I think we've kind of overused the word so much that now people are uncomfortable with the term authentic. Titling the book "Get Real: Telling Authentic Stories for Long-Term Success" kind of pulls it in a little more for people, which I think is great. But you can look back as far as forever. Think about it. The Bible is just a bunch of stories. That's how we communicate, and that's how we best understand Aesop's fables, Greek tales, the Viking, Norse, old stories about the Valkyrie, and all of those things. Okay, this is not something new, and I think that's where people get tied up in maybe thinking about it too much, because they're trying to imagine something new when in fact it's always been.
Right. Yep. Yeah, we don't need to overthink it. I think that's, and I don't know if it's even the overthinking as much as trying to be perfect. And there's no such thing. And then we don't actually want to tell authentic stories, but we want to tell marketing stories, right? And only show our better side or our best side and how perfect we are. So, sometimes I tell people, I say, I'm as perfect as I look on social media or whatever, or I'm as excited, right? But so every once in a while, you have to post things that are not just a marketing story.
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, because I don't know about you, but there are days where things just don't always go right.
Right.
It happens. I was doing an interview a few years ago with a guy I think at the time he was in Seattle. We had only started about 15 minutes in, and the power went out here. I disappeared. Didn't get back for 45 minutes. And God bless him, he held on and kept doing the show without me, which was great, but did not put me in a good light. Now, I could have certainly just hid that and redone the show and asked him to put that aside. But no, we played that up because I thought it was great. He went ahead and continued to do it. And what can you do? Sometimes these things happen.
So what did he do? He just talked
he just kept talking. Yeah. He just kept talking and saying, well, I bet she'll come back at some point.
And you never did. Well, you did.
I did, later. But almost 40 minutes. Yeah.
Wow. Oh, good for him.
Yeah. So one thing I always do with guests is ask them to leave our audience with one tweak or tip they can immediately affect in their life, be it personal or business. Something that you find useful for you, something that you do every day, or something that you just think would be really helpful.
Yeah. So the one thing I would recommend for people to think about is, how do you do whatever you need to do in the most efficient way? So I'll give you an example. Use the latest tools and just use them until they can't be used anymore because they go out of business, or I don't know. But I use this guy so often, the iPhone, for everything. In fact, now I'm talking about, here's all the little hacks I use for different apps, for different things. So figure out what are those tools that you can use, and then use them, and just use them to your advantage. Don't be afraid. Somebody said to me the other day, I was saying you could use this app, and they said, oh, now you have to learn that app. And I'm like, are you kidding me? You have to learn it. My 4-year-old picks up the iPhone like she's taken the 40-hour iPhone class. And, so there's nothing to learn. Just pick it up and go and do it and see if it helps you be more efficient, helps you do things differently. I'll give you an example. I mean, I post things on social media all the time. I blog all the time. Most people say to me, when do you do it? When do you post? When do you write? And I say, I write usually sitting at home on the couch, or sitting on the exercise bike at the gym, right? I don't recommend to blog while you're on the treadmill, but on a bike, why not, right? Yeah, I mean, it works. And somebody says, well, my goodness, if you do that, then now the workout isn't as good because now you're doing something else. That might be true, but it's still much better than me not doing any workout. So, right? So anyway, something to think about. Use the tools that are out there. There's plenty of tools out there. Just, keep that in mind.
I love the fact that you are so ready to jump on what's new. When we were in Victoria, I was fascinated to watch you because you do have that phone going all the time. You use it for pictures. You're very adept. And I think I think it's something people can take away. What you just said is really important. I'm going to add to your thing about being on the bike. You're engaging your brain while you're doing what you're doing on the bike, which should technically be burning more calories. So it can't be less of a workout. It's actually got to be more. That's just my thought anyway.
Maybe.
Quick question. What are your top 3 apps that you use on your iPhone every day?
You know what's funny about that is you can actually look that up, right? And the way you look it up,
well,
it's not like an exact science, but you look it up by seeing what uses battery the most.
Yep.
So I'm doing that right now. It's still there. Interesting. So in the last, yeah, that makes sense. So in the last 7 days by battery use, okay, I'll show it to you. So we have, I don't know if you can see it, Netflix, Twitter, and the 17%. So the reason Netflix is currently up because Orange is the New Black dropped their new season. I'm not allowed to watch that at home on the TV because it's not appropriate for children, for my daughters. And so that makes total sense. 70% Netflix, 11% Twitter, 9% Facebook makes sense. 7% the WordPress app. So we talked about writing on your phone, right? 7% Safari, 5% phone. I'm actually slightly surprised that the phone is up. That is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So phone is in the top 6, and top 6. And that is, I mean, I use my phone at work. I don't even use the office phone. I just have my cell phone and I use that. It's much simpler with the AirPods in and everything. So those are my top apps. I also use Hootsuite quite a bit still. There was a time I wasn't even recommending Hootsuite. Right now, they work pretty well. I know I think they're out there in Vancouver, right by Victoria, actually. So those are the apps I use. And then of course, when you're traveling, there's other apps, that you need to use.
Oh, that's really cool. It's great to see that everything you've told us in this interview, you just proved with your phone. You can even do your WordPress. It's all there, everything that you've said that you do. And I think that's absolutely a great impetus for people to say, you know what, obviously you can do it, and you can do it all with this little product that's right in your hand.
Right.
So no more excuses about not having a desktop computer or not having the latest big webcam or not having a laptop with incredible sound. The new phones really are little studios in themselves.
That is true.
So there's no reason why anybody can't do blogging, video, whatever you need to get those authentic stories out there. Everything to do with Christoph and his book and his other book, we will make sure we add to his page on BBPTV show. And I just have to say thank you ever so much to Christoph Trappe, the Authentic Storyteller. It was wonderful to have you here, and I look forward to seeing you hopefully again in Victoria and at other conferences, because I know you have a very full schedule. Are you coming to Ottawa anytime soon?
Not soon, but if you know of any conferences, send them my way.
Oh, we'll have to look at that for sure. I'm Elaine Lindsay, and this is BBP TV show affiliated with True Social Media. Check with us for next time. We have amazing guests that share their really interesting lives with you. Until then, make your day amazing, and we'll see you next time.